And welcome to Hannity. And tonight, with Senator Ted Cruz and Governor John Kasich dropping out of the race, Donald Trump is the presumptive Republican nominee. Now, let me start by explaining how we got to this point. Now, I know many of you are disappointed that Senator Ted Cruz got out of the race, and some are predicting that this is the end of the Republican Party. Now, a few on the GOP side say, oh, they're never going to vote for Trump. They'll stay home in November, or they may even vote for Hillary. Now, look, I want to start by saying I am extremely sympathetic in terms of how people's feelings are. I've been out on the road with these candidates. To run for president, that takes guts, courage, commitment. It truly is the ultimate blood sport. Now, Ted Cruz ran a really hard campaign, one of the toughest candidates I've ever witnessed. He took risks. He played the ground game better than most of the other candidates, but in the end, he did fall short. Now, if you really want to understand this election, to me, I think we need to go back to the beginning. So what set the stage for two very different outsider candidates to blow away every seasoned politician that was running? How is it that a record primary voting season like this unfolded? How did a guy like Mr. Trump, a man who defied all conventional political gravity, actually win the nomination and take out 16 others? Now, some of you out there, you're blaming, let's see, Fox News or blaming talk radio. By the way, personally, I wish I had that much power and that much influence. I don't, neither does anybody else. If I did, Obama never would have been president. Now, those of you who have that analysis, I think it's extremely shallow. And by the way, also predicated on this notion that, well, people are stupid. People were bamboozled. Sorry, I don't buy that for 1 second. Now, this is and has been a voter rebellion unlike anything I've ever seen in my lifetime, or maybe we'll ever see again. Now, do you really think, for example, let's go to Indiana last night. Do you really believe people voting for Trump in Indiana had no clue that he was not conventional? Do you really believe the voters there didn't see whatever flaws that he might have had? Do you really believe they didn't see the mistakes that were talked about ad nauseum all over TV and radio? In spite of all of that, the voters in Indiana chose him. The question is why? Now, my answer is I think the voters of Indiana knew exactly what was at stake last night. They knew it was do or die for Senator Ted Cruz. Now, they knew they had a lot of influence in deciding whether or not it came down to a contested convention or giving Trump the nomination. Now, let me tell you my theory. Now, Trump is a direct result. All you politicians in Washington, pay attention. It is a direct result of the institutional failure of Republican and Democratic governance. Now, all the things, for example, I laid out on my website, Hannity.com, in late 2013, he is a direct result that the Republican Party has actually allowed President Obama's radical agenda to be passed. They didn't stand up to him. Politicians cared more about their own money, their own power, than they did about the fact that we, have 20% of American families that don't have one single member of the family working? 95 million Americans out of the labor force, close to 50 million Americans suffering in poverty, more than 40 million Americans on food stamps, all record numbers. So they were complicit. Look at John Boehner, nearly $5 trillion in debt on his watch. And of course, Republicans had control and the power of the purse constitutionally. And now our national debt is more than $19 trillion, a burden we're putting on our kids and grandkids. Also, Republican trade deals. What have they done? They've hurt American workers. They've hurt manufacturing in the country. Illegal immigration has allowed, 11 or 14 million illegals into the country? What do? They compete for jobs. They drive down wages. And when it comes to the border wall, the wall that Donald Trump talks about? Well, the truth is, Republicans never wanted it built, or it would have been built. They cared too much about appeasing big business that thrive on cheap labor and, of course, donate to their campaigns. Democrats, well, they're smarter in a way. They're looking at this from the long term. They want a demographic shift that will keep them in power for generations. So if you want to sum this up, you, the people, got fed up. You're angry, you're frustrated, and rightly so, disgusted with D.C. Every exit poll showed 60 to 65% of Republican primary voters said enough's enough. They feel betrayed. Add to that, of course, that Americans, how many wars have we fought? We send our sons and daughters to fight, bleed, and die, our national treasure, then to have those wars politicized. We lost 5,000 brave Americans in Iraq and Afghanistan. They fight for gains. And then look at Ramadi. Look at Mosul and Tikrit and Fallujah that end up in the hands of ISIS. Look what happened in Vietnam. We can never allow this to happen again. Look at American schools. They're failing. The country's healthcare system has been destroyed, as well as inner city America. Now we have a government that allows over $100 billion to go to the #1 state sponsor of terror. What did Republicans do to stop it? Now, Trump was really the only candidate, for example. He took on controversial issues. For example, Muslim immigration. He spoke honestly about the concerns that people were having about this country letting in Syrian refugees, knowing that our director of national intelligence, our FBI director, and others were saying ISIS will infiltrate the Syrian refugee population. He said he wants to build up our military. He wants to take care of our veterans. And now Republican voters, with full knowledge of who Donald Trump is and was, are saying, we'll take our chance. We'll go with Donald Trump, with a non-politician, with a successful businessman who's created jobs. They know his imperfections, but people thought of the 17, he was the best option. After all, they're saying to themselves, what have we got to lose? Now, some conservatives may have concerns about Donald Trump. They have a right to feel that way. If I was advising Mr. Trump, I'd put together a written contract, like the contract with America. For example, a few years ago, I offered up a list of what I called conservative solutions, the Conservative Solution Caucus, to help get America back on track and stop this rapid decline. For example, let's live within our means, the penny plan, balance the budget, pass a balanced budget amendment, limit the amount of taxes government can collect from people, move America towards energy independence, create those jobs. Also, we have the benefit of not having to lean on countries that hate us for the lifeblood of our economy. Create health care savings accounts, get rid of Obamacare, enact term limits, allow choice in school, secure the borders. I also think that if Trump had wanted to take my advice, why not take a look at some of these great governors that took high deficits and created surpluses, high unemployment, and brought in hundreds of thousands of jobs. Some of their pictures are right there on the screen. My list includes many of his rivals. Strong conservatives who can help him get this country back on the right track. Here now with reaction. Author of The Greatest Comeback, Patrick J. Buchanan, is with us.